Welcome everybody to our Rapid Change Management webinar. So glad to have you here. And turning out to actually be quite a beautiful morning here in Southern California. And I do want to acknowledge it's Veterans Day, Paul. We scheduled this on Veterans Day. So just want to acknowledge all of our veterans out there that have served our country to protect our freedoms, to make this country what it is, which is amazing. The fact that we can be the ability to be what we want to be and argue about the points we want to argue about freely, which is just amazing. So glad we're having it on this day, and just want to recognize the veterans out there. So I am Brennan German. I am president of Bright Talent. With me is Renee Maurer. She is our head of operations. Hello. And then we also have Paul Falcone joining us as our guest. I'm going to get back to formally introducing Paul just in a minute. But I just wanted to quickly share, kind of give context as to what this webinar is about. So one of our core values at Bright Talent is to serve our community. And so we saw an opportunity with just all of the, let's just call it change that was happening, and a lot of the pressure that has been put on HR to affect change over the last 2.5 to 3 years. We saw an opportunity to develop some tools to create this channel of information for everybody, because we're kind of all in this and we're all learning on the fly. And I don't think anybody's figured it out or has it right yet, or doing it perfectly. So this is where we can all come together and talk about different topics. And so the idea behind the Rapid Change Management series was just that, to give back, to come together and talk about different topics. So hopefully with the idea that we're educating each other and learning from one another how to do things in terms of a best practice. And so what I do want to share with you right now is our website, because after we conduct this webinar, we're recording this webinar, and then we're going to down this webinar for on-demand viewing later. And so I'm going to pull up our website, so that if you go to our website, hopefully that's come up. If you go to our website, brighttalent.com, and you click on this green banner for the Rapid Change Management Playbook, it's going to take you to the Change Management page. And you will see there's 3 panels here. There's the Rapid Change Management Playbook, and that playbook was designed so that as you're affecting change in your organizations, you have tips, tools, templates to use to affect that change. As I say, one of the easiest things to do is to implement change. One of the hardest things to do is to put it into adoption, to actually have people follow that change. So this playbook is full of information on how to do that, from training to communication. And then we also created the Rapid Change Management webinar series, which I just mentioned. And we also have, if you don't want to do self-service, you need some assistance, we actually have services where we can help you. After this video is recorded, after this webinar is recorded, you come back here, you would click on Learn More, and this would take you to our webinar page. You will scroll down, here's today's webinar, and then scroll down, and here's the past webinars we've recorded. And that's, again, just free for download and to watch the series. So that's what this is about. And we've designed this too to not be presentation heavy. It's just more of a conversation. So as much as I call it a webinar, it's really more podcast style. So Paul and I have a couple of topics we're going to talk about. We're going to talk through it. So we're only going to be doing this for 30 minutes. So the first 15 minutes or so, Paul and I are going to cover a couple of key topics, and then we're going to have a live Q&A at the end. And Renee, who has now disappeared from the screen, Renee is going to be the moderator. And so Renee will read your questions at the end, and to make sure we get them answered. And if you have questions, we have the webinar Q&A feature turned on. So as Paul and I are talking, as you have questions, enter those questions into the Q&A, and then Renee will ask those more towards the end of the webinar. And hopefully you guys have lots of questions. I do. And so, and Paul will help us hopefully get them answered. So today's topic, so let's jump now in today's topic. So quiet quitting. When I first heard the term, Paul, this was my knee-jerk reaction was that, this is just another word for disengagement. And so we're going to cover 2 things. One, unpacking the meaning of engagement, which then therefore helps us understand disengagement. And then how do we meet the change in this behavior? Because if you hopefully agree or disagree either way, it is a bit of a phenomenon that we will need to respond to. But before we start into this, let me formally introduce our guest, and this is Paul Falcone. And just so glad that this worked out. We could be here together. Paul is principal of Paul Falcone Workplace Leadership Consulting. He's a best-selling author of 15 books with HarperCollins and American Management Association. He's the former CHRO of Nickelodeon, as well as a couple of other well-named organizations, including Paramount Pictures, Time Warner, and City of Hope. He has extensive experience in entertainment, healthcare, biotech, financial services, including international nonprofit and union environments. And for those of you like me, he is a wealth of information, and it's just amazing how much you are an amazing writer in the sense of how much information you put out in this world for us to read. So thank you for that, Paul. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Brennan. Sure.
So let's jump in to unpack the meaning of engagement. So according to the Gallup organization, it is the involvement and enthusiasm of employees in their work or workplace. And then Marcus Buckingham, when he was with Gallup, coined the term people join companies and leave managers. So to level set, in your experience, maybe help us get what is engagement, and then we can understand what is disengagement.
It's the easiest thing to do for me, Brennan, is think about your favorite boss. When you worked for someone who you always felt like that person had my back, that person challenged me to do things I didn't even think I was ready for. She seemed to have more faith in me than I had in myself. That's where you get the discretionary effort, right? These are the people who want to go above and beyond because the relationship to their boss is so strong. The trust is there, the respect is there, the like is there. When you put that all together, it's a formula that you can't beat. And no one's going to leave for 15 or 20% to go somewhere else, because the risk that you have is the grass won't be greener. And I don't want to risk giving up a great manager for someone who may spit fire and throw chairs.
Right.
So that's where you see the retention come in. And I think this whole idea of engagement is, it's not just that their minds are in it, but their hearts are in it. Their spirits are into what they're doing. And that really differentiates when you talk about employee engagement and employee satisfaction. That's really at the height of where it can be. It's the relationship with the boss.
Right. So and I'm hoping everybody's agreeing, shaking their heads. We've all hopefully had an amazing manager like this, so we know what that feels like, and the energy you put into the role. And I'm, as you said that, and they're encouraging you, as you said, you took me back earlier in my career. Yeah, they were really pushing me to be better beyond I even knew my capabilities. And then you get fired up and you reach this next level of expertise.
Correct.
Great way to put this. So then the opposite, right? And from a traditional view, what's the opposite of engagement then to create disengagement?
Typically, it's drawing the lines. It's kind of what this whole idea of quiet quitting is. I'm done. I don't want to go anything more than this. It's a foxhole mentality. I'm just going to do my job. And at the extreme, it's no one better bother me because I just want to do my job and go home. And the problem with that is that's no longer a living. That's a dying. There's nothing there. No one should feel that way about their companies, but we know that they do. And of course, I think COVID really brought that out in a lot of situations because people were just exhausted, and they still are. And they're just we're kind of coming around the bend, I hope. There may be more spurts of COVID, we don't know. But as far as the majority of it, the seriousness of the illness, I think that may be behind us at that point, which would be a great thing. But people are going to feel this for several years more. This is not something that just ends on a particular date and time.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and I think that's a defining line there. When you look at the side of a hill and you see that geographic color change of the shift of the plates, and something significant happened, right? It all looks kind of normal until that shift, and that's what this feels like with the pandemic. And so when I first started reading about this, I initially had that gut reaction, oh, this is just young professionals coining disengagement, a different word. And then it really dawned on me, I'm like, no, as you just said, we just all experienced something traumatic together. And like we said in our little rehearsal, the first 2 weeks of this pandemic, hey, we were in it together. We were going to shut down, for a couple of weeks. And then after that, everything changed. And I think we all got kind of frustrated, fearful. What is going on? This is taking longer than we thought. And so Here we are still dealing with a lot of that. In a lot of ways, that's trauma. Either way, that's change. And I just saw a title today, Who Moved by Cheese, but who keeps moving the cheese? So it's not
Mhm.
just who moved my cheese from one place to another, it keeps changing. And this was as an example of, I can't find my food at Costco anymore. The prices keep going up. So even the simplest things in life are
Mhm.
changing. So then that's having an impact, not just in our personal lives, but at work. So all of a sudden, those traditional definitions of disengagement, we're needing to get rest, I believe. I almost wonder if this is quiet resting, or the other term might be, is this quiet boundary setting versus quiet quitting? Because if you're disengaged for the traditional reasons, that's disengagement, right? From my perspective. But this is different. So if you're still like your job, you like your manager, but you're just needing to get that balance. What are your thoughts on that? This idea of maybe quiet something other than quitting, unless that's truly disengagement.
Yeah, here's another metaphor. It's like God rattled our cage, right? All of a sudden,
Yeah.
you're like, whoa, all of the assumptions that we've had prior to 2020 are kind of off the table. And we saw I'm not going into politics, Lord knows, but what we're seeing in politics, what we're seeing in sports, what we're seeing in corporate America with the biggest CEOs of these companies and sexual harassment, it's like everything is being upended.
Yeah.
And that's something that it's hard to just lock the door. You can't lock the door, walk into the office or walk onto the shop floor and leave it behind. And likewise, you don't go home at night and leave it behind. It's become part of us. And I think that's what's really, really a challenge right now. And people reach a point where they say, hey, I'm exhausted. I've been working double shifts. I've been working 7 days. I'm to a point where I'm not going to give myself a heart attack. I've seen too many people die. We lost over 1 million people to this illness. And it's like, I don't want to see myself. Life is too short. And so this mentality started with I don't know, I'm not doing this anymore. I don't know what I'm going to do, but it's not going to be this, fill in the blank. I'm not going to be a nursing assistant. I'm not going to be a bartender. I'm not going to wait tables. The problem is, of course, companies need people who are qualified with prior experience. And those are the people who weren't coming back. And we still face that problem. So they're real challenges and they're fundamental shifts, to your point, in terms of our expectations about ourselves and about our lives.
And so for me, I disagree with some of those because of what you said and that rift and the tectonic plates of our careers because of COVID. This is real. And this is where I finally got to, like, quiet quitting. Don't know if I like the term, but at least what is happening is real. And it's not necessarily disengagement as we know it. And then the other big question here is, I'm looking people on the list of our attendees, and I know some of them, and I'm guessing their age range, but is this generational, right? You and I kind of are in the same generation, X-ish, group, and is it generational? So are we seeing not only a change of behavior because of the pandemic, but also a change of behavior in what Gen Xers, boomers think work should be like versus the millennials, Gen Y, Gen Z? Are we seeing this change rapidly happen because of the pandemic too, where it might have taken longer to happen?
Correct. You hit the nail on the head. Many of these things were already in play. And what the pandemic did is just put them on steroids, right? It just sped them all up. So for example, when you look at the Gen Y, the millennials, which are basically the 40 and under crowd, and you look at the Gen Z, the Zennials, which is the 25 and under crowd, these are the two most studied generational cohorts in world history. We know everything about them. We've studied them up, down, and center. And the funny thing is, when you look at the reports over and over again, you still come up with the top 5. And one of the top 5 issues for these particular generations, they're not identical generations, but they have a lot in common. They've had a lot of similar experiences, is they want career and professional development. Now, there's other things that they want too, right? They want diversity of voice and thought and, people. They're looking for work-life family balance. They want corporate social responsibility and environmentalism. They want to work for a company that's ethical, management that cares about them. So you keep coming back to these top 5. But my argument is you've got to focus on career and professional development. And the reason why is, of the top 5, I think that one in many ways is the easiest to address. But companies haven't done that, and they should have been doing it all along, Brendan, and they weren't. And now it's time for us to kind of make the space to be able to have those conversations. Leadership is a team sport, and leadership is personal. And if you're really treating your people like widgets, you're not going to retain them. There really has to be a management down, focus on getting to build rapport, getting to build relationships.
Right. And I think this is a perfect transition point to move out of unpacking engagement to now moving into the how do we meet this change in behavior? So you started touching on this. So the idea was to level set on what is this engagement, disengagement, quiet quitting, quiet resting, quiet boundary setting, whatever, kind of getting that understanding of what it is. And now, how do we, this is a bit of a new phenomenon. You know, if we were doing employee surveys, not even sure if it's getting picked up, right? I think this is going to come down to potentially one-on-one conversations here. So, you know, if this is in disengagement for slightly different reasons than our historical definition, how are we plugging into the pulse of our employees to capture this?
You know, part of this is very predictable, right? We saw what was going on with this massive pandemic. It was scary, especially in 2020, how scary it was, how many people died. The reality is, it's not rocket science. A lot of times you can look at this stuff and say, well, you know, you're going to go through phases of this. For example, well, the ships are stuck in the harbor. That means that when you go to Target, there's not going to be anything on the shelves. That means the prices are going to go up. That means there can be a recessionary trend. All that's predictable, but people are predictable too. That they would have to work so hard, besides doing double shifts in 7 days and having their vacations denied because they can't get away from work because the company can't stay open without them because there's no people, right? The reality becomes, you know, how do you re-engage them? It's okay that they're scared. It's okay that they're foxholed. I get it. You have to make it safe for them to come out of the foxhole and really try and reinvent themselves. You know, motivation, you can't motivate your employees. Motivation is internal, right? I can't motivate you. You can't motivate me. But as a manager, you are responsible for creating an environment where people can motivate themselves. And a lot of times where that self-motivation kicks in is when there's a strong relationship with the immediate supervisor. So if there's really one kernel to walk away with, it's really to think about how do I build that bridge to kind of build stronger relationships and be someone's favorite boss. It's a prism. It's like everything about employee engagement, employee satisfaction, performance and productivity can all be whittled down to this one idea. Am I doing my best to be my people's favorite boss at this point in their careers?
So this is great. And we're, you know, I'm assuming some of us on this call are managers. So we probably are getting some good feedback here in terms of how we could do this with our own teams. But in HR, we're also the people, right? So we're supposed to be the ones helping the people do these things. So what are some tidbits? So I don't know why I said that. Sounds like a dog treat. What are some tips? What are some tips that we can share that where we could go out and help our managers understand kind of the framework of what's happening, give them the context, introduce them to this idea of, hey, it's a little different than normal disengagement. We've got great people, but let's not take, I guess that's the right thing, is let's not assume anything about anyone, even our top performers that appear happy and engaged. Let's not assume. What tips can we give us to help our managers manage their people more effectively that way?
Well, the easiest thing, it's a great question. I always say, keep it simple. We don't have to get too complex on this stuff. As a society, we've lost the ability to sit around the campfire and have the elders pass wisdom down to the younger generations. We just don't have the time, or we're too busy with social media and looking at our iPhones. But the reality is that's what we have to get back to. And that can come in a million different forms in your company. So I think as an HR person, what I've always tried to do is I like doing training and I like talking to the frontline operational managers because A, it helps me build good relationships with them, and B, it makes them feel like they're being heard. Okay, it's not HR in a silo, it's HR as the glue that binds everybody. So when I call these meetings and we talk about these things, the question becomes is what can we do? Because the answers are there. They'll know the answers if you kind of tease it out of them, as opposed to telling them, well, we're starting a blah, blah, blah program. But think about it, internal coaching and mentoring. That's not rocket science. Right. Creating an ambassador program for someone who wants to do more community relations and represent the company. Creating a buddy system for onboarding so that you have someone who's assigned to a new hire in the first 90 days. These are easier things to do than you think.
Yeah.
And you can put together a one-page guideline for what we expect from mentors and what we expect from, you know, ambassadors and what we expect from buddies, but basically give them the flexibility to do that. The ones who step up for that, those are your leaders. Those are the ones, you talk about succession planning, the ones who step forward to put themselves out there in leadership roles are the ones who are at the top of the list, typically in terms of wanting to get ahead in their careers. So these are some easy, simple, practical things that we can do, but you've got to do it in conjunction with your leadership team so they feel they have some level of buy-in and input to how it marches out.
And to even build upon that, even maybe taking it one step even simpler than calling it a program, even asking one of the managers, maybe that you have a trusted relationship, or just put a blanket out there. I love how you say, let's see if somebody raises their hand. And just to help you create a one-page document of what is happening in this post-COVID world that we need to be aware of as managers. And some questions they could simply, what is it? And then some questions that they could ask their employees. I love that idea. So you're partnering with business leadership and then just quickly distributing this and educating the managers. This is happening. Here's some questions to ask your employees just to stay plugged in. And then let's just report back. What's the feedback you're getting?
Exactly. It doesn't have to be a formal focus group. It doesn't have to be a survey. It can be.
Right.
But again, a focus group and a survey are different than when you're sitting in a small group with your leader, with your department head.
Right.
And then you're right, then pull the department heads back to find out what are some of these bigger trends that are going on out there. But again, it's got to be personal. It's got to be a connection that maybe didn't exist before. I mean, look, when you talk about this idea of greater work-life and family balance,
right,
that's big among Gen Y and Gen Z. It is, but it's bigger among Gen X. It's the 42 to 57-year-olds. Those are the ones who really want it. They got a taste of it. And they realize they don't have to live their lives on Saturday and Sunday because Monday to Friday is booked 8 to 5 all the time.
Right.
So, there are demographic shifts, there are demographic trends, and we would be wise to pay attention to them. I'm not saying a company can't snap back to no more, remote work, everyone back in the office Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. You can do that. You're a CEO. There's some benefits to doing that. There's a control issue to it. Obviously, you can see what's being done. You can make sure that people are getting along better because there's more camaraderie when people work side by side. Right. I get that too. But you're going to risk coming across as tone deaf.
Yep.
A lot of the younger gen, they're like, hey, listen, I'm looking to change jobs. If there's no remote flexibility at all, I'm not even going to look at that company. So it gets hard for recruitment. It gets hard for retention. And I think this is one of those things, Brendan, where the thing is out of the box, the Pandora, we've gotten a taste of something and we believe it's better, but that trend was underway anyway. It is one of the big 5 things that Gen Y and Gen Z are looking for. So again, like I say, it was sped up by the pandemic, but it was there all along. And the pandemic, because of Zoom, which 3 years ago, I didn't even know what Zoom was. Now I Zoom all the time. The technology was there to allow it.
Yeah.
And so a wise employer is going to look at these things and say, how can I incorporate it reasonably, as opposed to having a hard rule, a hard, short and fast, boom, this is it. I don't know that that's going to work well with the employees.
And so we're talking about these tips, right? What to do. And what's kind of looping in my head, you and I are probably more aligned in what we might want and think. As you come up with these solutions, you don't want to be divisive, but is there different solutions by generation? Do you do that? I'm kind of just sitting here looping in my head. You can't be all things to all people. It would seem weird to do things by generation, but if we need to
how old are you? Well, let me see. You get this.
I know, but I'm just sitting here thinking out loud with you. We can't be all things to all people. We can't just serve one group of people. So we just got to come up with these plans that kind of serve, and let's not forget the revenue profitability of the business while we're at it too, right? That's obviously top. And then what's the right thing to do, I guess.
Yeah, but again, the answer would be there's multiple things to do, right? For example, I've always been someone who says I want to have quarterly meetings with my employees. It's not just a once a year annual review. Just like Wall Street does 10Q quarterlies to lead up to the 10K annual report. I want to have those times where my employees can tell me how they're doing towards their goals, what it is that they're focusing on in their careers right now. How can I help them build their resume and their LinkedIn profile? That was my comfort zone. Not everyone does that, and that's okay. For other people, it's setting up weekly meetings. So everyone, especially if they're remote, feels aligned and they know what's going on. There's different ways to do this. And it's okay when we say there are 5 things that we know the Gen Y and the Gen Z want. And they now make up 40% of the workforce. And that's changing exponentially as the baby boomers retire, which is 10,000 a day right now as baby boomers move into retirement. So the question is, try different things, ask, even if you want to try it just for 90 days, you don't have to try it forever.
Sure.
But put some guidelines out there, get the feedback and the ideas from your employees, and then try and move forward with them. I think that's the best way. There's a looseness here. There's a I've got your back kind of feeling. You can work with peace of mind here. I want to kind of give those ideas to my employees so they can do their best work every day.
I think that's a great point. We're not working on perfection. We're not even working on maybe some long-term things or even how effective it is. It's just what we feel is the right thing to do at this stage, this season, right, in our careers in the company's position.
Yeah, and at this stage of the progression of the pandemic, because we're still in this thing,
right?
And for where we are right now, just recognize where it is, recognize why people feel the way they feel, and then make it safe for them to come out of that foxhole by asking for their input and spending the time, but making the space for them to be able to talk with you about what their needs are.
All right, so thank you for that. I want to make sure we have enough time to get to questions. So switching gears, the voice behind the scenes, Renee, has been watching the Q&A list coming in. Yes. Renee, do we have any questions for Paul?
Of course. So one of our first questions is, what are some internal mentor-mentee program best practices?
There's a difference between a mentor and a coach, for example, but stay with the mentor. The idea of the mentor is someone who can be with you for years. It's someone who's probably been in your discipline, who's been in your shoes, who you can go to for help, right? It's not an external person like a coach who doesn't know the players in the company. It's an internal type of thing. I think what you need to do is you need to figure out who among your senior leaders would be interested in doing that role, and what type of time commitment they can make to it. And then you can put together guidelines and questions for them so that when they meet with their mentee, they have things to talk about. We're all adults. My feeling is, if you want to be mentored, you are the one who manages the meetings. You set the times, you set the agenda, and you depend on your mentor to help you through whatever you're being challenged with. But at the same time, I want the mentors to be, they've got to have some questions in their pockets so that they know what to ask if it goes quiet or it goes silent or it gets uncomfortable in the meeting. So again, I think those are some simple things, Renee, that people can do. And it's a goodwill outreach. It's a goodwill effort, but think about it. It's part of your recruitment practice. It's something that you write about on your company intranet page. It now becomes part of your culture, and it becomes a selfless leadership type of thing, which I think a lot of people would enjoy, especially when you've got multiple generations in the workforce, which we do now. We've got 5 generations for the first time in US history in the workforce at the same time. So give the elders a chance to pass that wisdom down to some of the newer ones.
Okay, great, thank you. Another question, how much has increase in remote work from home contributed to this issue, the quiet quitting and lower engagement, and tactics as we move into more flexible workforce environment to increase this engagement?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's no one size fits all. In certain cases, the fact that people had the freedom to work from home, even now, say 1 or 2 days a week, is great. But we also know that the number one problem that people have who work remotely is they are lonely and they are isolated. And if they feel like they're getting cut off from the company culture, if they're not part of even some of the smallest decisions, they will look elsewhere, even though they love the idea of working remotely. So there's no one size fits all here, everybody. It's going to depend not only on the company, but on the department and on the individuals involved. And I think the conversations are where you need to go with this. That's really the most important part. This has to be personal. This has to give that feeling of, I've got your back and I'm here to help you. Let's figure it out together. That's what will make people respond to this. And as long as you kind of keep that goal in line, then the rest of it will kind of fall in, but it will look different for different departments, different companies, and different individuals.
And I'll add, Paul, Gallup did research early on, and it's sustaining in that for both leaders and employees, the hybrid model seems to be the most popular choice. Not to say fully remote, not to say fully back in the office. It seems this hybrid approach. So that dynamic becomes very interesting if you've had employees move away and such. So that, again, that'll be different things to think through. Let me pause for 1 second. We're at 9:30, but we're loving this topic. So Renee, we're gonna keep going. For those of you that have to drop off, we're recording it. You could always come back and watch the end of this if you can't stay. Paul, hopefully you can stay.
I can stay, I'm good.
Okay, good. So we're gonna keep going to get through these questions.
Okay. So you did kind of touch on this a little bit, but an extension of it, what is the boundary for managers to ensure that people are happy without crossing a line into too much of their personal life?
That's a really good question too. Okay, again, you guys kind of keep this simple. When you think about what is your role and what is your goal, when I say make it personal, it means sitting with Paul Falcone and saying, Paul, tell me about where you are right now in terms of your goals. It's been 3 months since we've met. Have you had to pivot anywhere? Are we going to need additional resources? Okay, that's one question. And then another question is, Paul, tell me where I can help you in terms of your own career and professional development. Because we know that's one of the big five, you might as well just ask the question and put it out there and see where they take it and see how you can help them. What I've always done, Renee, was with my employees, I would tell them, I will help you with your resume. I will help you with your LinkedIn profile. As you're garnering achievements and accomplishments, come to me. Let me help you put dollars on it, percentages on it. What have you done to increase revenue, decrease costs, save time? And how do we make that look like a bullet on your resume? Because I want people thinking in terms of achievements and accomplishments. When they're thinking that way, it's better for the company. And what I don't want is comma players. I don't want someone who says, I do phones, comma, filing, comma, correspondence, comma. I don't care. It's a job description. Really, I'm looking for someone who's blowing the roof off of the place. Why is it a better company for your having been here? That's where I want to get my people thinking. And I think when they've got a boss who can, again, tease that out of them, make it safe for them to partner with them, man, that makes a difference. People do not leave if they've got a boss who's that engaged in their well-being, because I want for them what they want for them. It's not that I want for them what I want for me through them. If you can see the difference there, and they know when that boss is being sincere and authentic, and they'll stay with that. They're not going to leave that.
That's a huge distinction. And you had talked about this earlier, but maybe this is also where you squeeze in the stay interview. Why are they staying? Right. I love when we talked about that earlier. Why are they staying? And just be quiet and help you understand why they're staying there versus leaving.
Exactly. And also the idea of the stay interview is to be proactive. What you don't want to do is find out that you've lost one of your best, performers during an exit interview where they say they're leaving because blah, 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 but you didn't make the space to find that out. Right. And now it's got that's the regrettable turnover. I've lost someone. Oh, I can't live without this guy. With Sheila gone, I don't know what I'm going to do. Well, you should have met with her 3 months earlier. So those are the kinds of things, everyone. Again, there are some simple steps that you can take, but sitting with someone and saying, Brendan, I'm just gonna be honest with you. I really like working with you. You are my right-hand person, and you know that. I don't want you to leave. And I'm not assuming that you are, but I do want to talk to you about that so we can get ahead of that, so I can really understand how you're feeling about the organization on a scale of 1 to 10, or how you're feeling about your role in the organization on a scale of 1 to 10. Tell me about that. I'm really interested in hearing, because I care that much. When people can hear that, whether you use those words or they just feel it in what you're saying, that's what builds bonds. It's not easy to turn on if you haven't had that relationship with your employees, but start in smaller increments, smaller steps. You can build that muscle fairly quickly once they realize that you're being sincere about it.
Great.
I have one more here. We have time for this one? Okay. So does or will the Elon Musk approach at Twitter work? For example, you must be in the office or else quit, and not so quietly. What are your thoughts on that?
No, real quick. I'm sorry. There are so many problems in Musk organizations, and I mean no offense to those of you who either work for a Musk organization or are a fan, but between the harassment complaints, the multiple lawsuits, the class actions, the look in your email tomorrow to find out if you have a job, and I want everyone back to work starting tomorrow. You guys, it's almost a playbook of, in my opinion, what not to do as a leader. Now, the funny thing I'll say, and my final thought is this: you need to have bad managers in your career from time to time, because they help you define who you are not. And that's important because it gives you guardrails. When you say, oh, I see this experience, I don't ever want to go through this again, and I'll never perpetuate this on the people who report to me, there's a learning element in that. But from everything I read about the way Mr. Musk is handling things, not just with Twitter, but what he was doing, at Tesla and everything else, and all these lawsuits and all, it just sounds horrible to me. I mean, I'm sorry. I know he's a genius, and I'm sure he's reinventing space and batteries and all these different kinds of things. But the leadership piece, you have to be successful through people, not despite them. And he strikes me as someone who is successful despite people. And I just don't see the logic to it.
I think that's a great point to end in terms of, what not to do, as well as the ramifications of doing it. So and taking this phenomenon seriously and not just dismissing it, which I did initially, and rather looking at it a little more closely. So Paul, brilliant. Thank you so much for your time and sharing all this information. Again, just to remind everybody, we have recorded this, and this will be downloaded to our website probably within a week, and we'll notify you when it is downloaded. Everybody have a great rest of the week, great weekend. Paul, thank you again for your time. It's greatly appreciated.
Thanks, Brendan. Thanks, Renee.
All right, take care.
Bye.